introduce you. Welcome, LA Progressive friends, family, readers. Dick and I are delighted to have with us here today the District Attorney of the County of Los Angeles, George Gascón, a person that we endorsed and voted for, and many progressives in the Southern California, Los Angeles County specifically, cheered when he was sworn in. So welcome, District Attorney Gascón.
Thank you, Sharon and Dick. Good to see you both.
Thank you. Thank you. So just recently, actually about a week ago, Dick and I were at a gathering at a friend's home. And at that gathering, there was a person there who is a formerly incarcerated who actually ended up serving, in excess of 2 decades. And this person talked about how everyone where he was so encouraged by the fact that LA County had chosen a progressive DA, district attorney. And at the same party, same event, there was a public defender. And this public defender also was delighted. And she says that all of her colleagues were delighted. However, she expressed disappointment in the fact that while you had a wonderful campaign platform, the opposition that you experienced from within your own office caused you to take a step back. And what she was disappointed about, she expected there to be opposition. What she was disappointed about is that you didn't seem to be prepared to deal with that opposition. So we're going to start there because you have a tremendous amount of support in Southern California.
Thank you.
But you have some issues within your own department. So can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, actually, I was prepared for a lot of what has occurred. I think what perhaps I could say that I wasn't prepared for the sort of the opposition that within the office has manifested itself in the way that it has by a small group of people, by the way. And, that has created obviously some, has created some hurdles. As to in general, the political opposition, I think that was expected. The campaign was very clear. We saw what the battle lines were. The first recall against me was attempted actually the day I was sworn in. They were trying to start the first recall, and they had to be reminded or told that they had to wait 90 days. In 90 days and 1 minute, they filed the first recall. And then that one failed. They spent about $2 million, and then they went at it again, and they spent another $9 million. And we see it today, right? I mean, there are already 5 people, very, very much from the right wing of the extremes of our community and other communities that are putting money to run against me. And I would say that a lot of that is because we are being effective. The things that I promised that I would do in the campaign, we're doing them. I talked about stopping the death penalty. We have. Not only that, but we have taken now 23 people off death row. I talked about, we would reduce the way that we handle enhancements. We're in an epic fight. We're actually going to the Supreme Court of California on my policy on 3 strikes. And, and I feel encouraged by the fact that the Supreme Court took the case, that both the Superior Court here with a very conservative judge, a former prosecutor, and then the appellate court, the first appellate court, ruled that, that I did not have the discretion that I believe that I have. And the fact that the Supreme Court is taking that case gives me hope, because if they agree with the lower courts, it would have simply just let the ruling stand, but they haven't. We talk about keeping, kids out of adult court systems, and by and large, we have. We've only transferred 1 kid in the entire period of time that we have been here. We talked about dealing with police accountability, and we have now prosecuted more police officers in my first 2 years than the 2 prior DAs over a period of 20 years. Jackie Lacey did 1, and I'm talking for force, and I'm not talking about domestic violence. I know that Jackie Lacey did those, and I do as well. but we're talking about for police work that is unconstitutional. And Steve Cooley didn't do any in 12 years. We're now up to, I want to say it's somewhere just below 50 in total numbers year to date, including over 7. I want to say it's now 8 for excessive force. We promised that we were going to look back at some of the old shootings and that I was going to bring a special prosecutor. And we brought Mr. Lawrence Middleton, who is now doing the work, and he just got an indictment on 2 Torrance police officers for the murder of Andre Mitchell. We did a lot of talking about dealing with misdemeanor offenses in a very different direction. And we have, when you look at those addiction-related misdemeanors, the prosecution of those cases has almost come to a stop. We've worked with the county health department and local law enforcement to address violence, looking at it through the lens of a public health issue. We're doing so much. And I think that, for some people, it's not going to be fast enough, right? And I understand that. And for other people, it's too much. I just come out of an editorial board meeting, and that's the reason I was a little late, where, some people in the more conservative side of our community feel that I'm doing too much, right? And, you hear crime being blamed on the policies, and then we have to educate people and say, well, do you understand that crime rates are higher in those communities that have traditional, quote unquote, law and order prosecutors, and they're here, and that actually our homicide rates are going down this year, and that what we had was the pandemic impacted, so much of our lives, and that in fact, when crime was going up during the pandemic, it was going up in every community, not just LA, and in many of those communities that have very hardcore Republican prosecutors, it was going up at much higher levels, and it continues to be. So we have to educate the public also that these policies are actually not causing crime. To the contrary, they're saving lives, and over a long haul will continue to save more lives. Most of the people that we have released, by and large, like resentencing, we have now resentenced about 70 people between those that we have prosecutor initiated and those that CDCR presented to us. Only one has reoffended. We put a fully restorative justice model for juveniles. Those kids are doing well. Now, is it enough? Look, it's not enough for me. When I became the district attorney, I wanted to have more mental health beds, right? And we were told we were going to have more mental health beds. 2.5 years later, we still don't have them, right? 50% of the people that are in our jail have severe mental health problems, and some of them are dangerous, and we don't have a place to put them. We know that jails don't cure mental health, right? Just like they don't cure cancer, but we have what we have, right? So I think that, what people don't understand often, and I understand the impatience, but, this is heavy lifting. I tell you, and I wish sometimes if you got, I brought some people from the public defender's office that are here now, which are incredible people. They're doing, my head of communications is a former public defender. The people running our justice integrity division are resentencing. The director is a former public defender. The person that is doing death penalty habeas work is a former public defender. But 2.5 years now into this, they will all tell you, my God, I did not realize how complicated and how hard the system is. And I tell you, I sometimes have a little bit of complaining to do about public defenders, especially because they often do not do any favors to the system when they do not talk about the problems of their clients. And I'll give you a perfect example and a comparison. We had a case involving a young trans woman named Hannah Tubbs, who has, severe problems. And she was arrested for a sexual assault that she had been involved when she was a minor. She got arrested as an adult years later. We proceeded with her case as the law allows to be treated as a minor, even though I had people in my office that were undermining the work every day and providing Fox News with false information. We knew that there was a great deal about the life of this person that needed to be unpacked that would actually help this person. And yet the public defenders decided that they would just ride the coattails of my work, but not go out there and talk about the problem that Hannah Tops had. Consequently, this young woman, trans woman, has been singled out for hate, and her life is probably in danger, and now she's being prosecuted in another county. And the tale of all this hate that was promulgated by the right and by Fox News and all that stuff, without any real defense, which I could provide because I don't have the ability to talk about her, because as a juvenile, I can't talk about it, and it's really harmed her. On the other hand, we had a case the other day of a young man that murdered someone a year and a half ago, a really tragic event. He murdered a janitor at a building. It was a horrendous event, but this young man had tremendous mental health problems, and I can say that now because he had a defense attorney, not a public defender, that came out very aggressively publicly and walked the people through the history of this young man and where he was and how this crime occurred and why he should be treated the way he was treated. And basically a story that the LA Times was initially going to do, that was going to be a hit piece on my policies, became a story about the tragedy of the loss of this family person, that his wife is completely devastated in the family, and the horrendous impact on this young man and sort of his trajectory. Very different story than the story that I got on the Hannah Tops case, where the public defender decided to remain quiet. I think that people often say, well, he's not doing enough. And, sometimes I ask a question, say, well, what are you doing? Where are you stepping up and speaking up? Because often I hear about my prosecutors using the derogatory language towards Black people in the courtroom or other people. And I hear somebody from the public defender's office say, well, this person is a racist, and they did. I said, okay, put it in writing, because I have a civil service process that I have to deal with. And if I'm going to discipline somebody, I have to have evidence. Well, I don't want to do that because I have to work with these people every day. So I said, well, don't tell me about it then. So, I take it with a pinch of salt. Nothing is perfect, and clearly I can do better every day, and I look for ways to do better every day. But I think often some people forget just how much we're doing and where we are in comparison to where we were. And often the right, on the other hand, they're relentless. They're attacking every day. They don't care about the lies. They continue to lie, and it goes over and over and over again. So, I think that we need to work together, and we need to call, this is not anything. And by the way, when I say we, all this work, every one of my policies was put together by community groups and experts in the area. I didn't think about it myself. The work that I'm doing, I could not do without the support of the community. I could not do it without the support of women and men in this office that are working their backsides off. They're being attacked on social media. We have the women of color that I brought over in this office. They're being brutally assaulted on social media. Racist remarks, talks about their physical appearance. That would never happen for a male white. It happens. In fact, we have public defenders that are male whites, and they're doing wonderful work, by the way, but they're not getting attacked on social media the way that the women of color, especially African-American women, are being attacked. I don't see anybody from the public defender defending their old co-workers. In fact, I see them sniping at them sometimes. So, I know I may sound a little frustrated here, and I know this is being recorded, and I'm doing it because I want people to hear this, right? It's important that people hear this.
Absolutely.
So you mentioned community support. I mean, that's why we're doing this in our small way. How you can combat the right wing is by getting your truth out. So the formerly incarcerated person that Sharon mentioned had served, I believe, 25 years in prison, and met you in prison, in Lancaster prison. And he said he and all the prisoners around him were deeply supportive of your efforts, and still now, even though you've met headwinds. But I wonder, you mentioned a couple things. You mentioned civil service regulations and the fact that you have some assistant district attorneys who are undermining the efforts of what you've done. Going forward, you need to deal with that in some fashion, I would think. Do you have a better strategy for sidelining those people?
So let me give you one example that illustrates, and we're dealing with it, by the way. And the way we're dealing with is we're hiring new people. You know, shifting the culture of a large organization takes time. And by the way, there are a lot of men and women in this office that are supporting the work. The problem is that we usually just hear, you know, the loudest voices. But let me give you an example that I can actually tell you now because it's public, because it was a trial. When I first became the DA, there are 35 head deputies in this office. And if you can think of a head deputy as kind of like sort of the mid-level, upper level, supervisory level management, not the executive level. It's right, you know, right in between. Out of those, we move 15, and we basically move them around within their rank, their pay. They did not lose any, they were not demoted. No pay was taken away. Simply, we tried to put them into different functions, head deputy function for head deputy function. And the way that movement occurred is that we had some people that have been in the office years prior, and they made the recommendations within that world how to move people, because unlike somebody like Larry Krasner, for instance, went to Philadelphia and, you know, one weekend he fired half of his management staff. You don't get to do that here, right? You can because of the protection of civil services. So we took the people that we have, we moved them around. We had one person who was literally physically left in the same office that she was because she wanted to be close to her home. And we accommodated that, even though the new job that she had physically was somewhere else. We let her work remotely. She kept the same rank, she kept the same pay, and was put in a very important role, by the way, just a different role. She sued, okay? And I said, you know, I'm not going to settle this case because it's obscene. You know, she claimed that I was retaliating because she was a whistleblower. By the way, her claim of whistleblowing was that she talked about the impact of my policy on juveniles. Now, understand that my policy on juveniles was put on the front page of the LA Times. It's on my website. I talked about it openly. So, you know, you would probably, when you think of whistleblowing, you say, this is somebody that is grabbing a piece of information that is hidden somewhere that is, you know, that is unlawful or immoral, and they're exposing that. No, she's talking about a policy that cannot be any more public. Basically, me saying, I'm gonna treat kids like kids. I'm not gonna prosecute kids as adults. That's really the essence of the policy. And in her mind, she felt that the policy was illegal. Now, interestingly enough, we had many legal experts that said this is a legal policy. And in fact, it has withstood the time of this. No court has said this is an unlawful policy. We go to court, right? She's suing because she says that I retaliated and I gave her a job that was of lesser status, even though it's same pay, same rank, same physical location. The judge, in my opinion, wrongfully, and we're in the process of looking at this, says, we're saying, Your Honor, the policy is lawful. We have, there is no one that's proven, and the judge actually tells the jury, well, it's not important whether it's lawful or not, it's whether she felt that it was unlawful. So it's like, I can tell you that the sky is red, and you say, but wait a minute, the sky is blue, and you can say, well, it's not important that it's blue, it's do you feel that it's red, right? I mean, that's really what it was, right? So to make a long story short, and I could go on and on in this trial, the jury awards her $1.5 million. Okay, $750,000 for past harm, and $750,000 for future harm. When we polled the jury after the trial and said, well, what's the future harm? Because you haven't articulated. Well, we didn't know. We just needed to put something there. Okay, so this is the world that I live in, and I live this world daily. I have a prosecutor in a courtroom calling black kids hyenas. Okay, I tried to discipline this person. A year and a half later, we still haven't gotten to a place. He calls Black kids and says that they're raping each other, right? This is in a courtroom, right? Now, understand that this is a person that is dealing primarily with African American and Latino kids every day as a prosecutor, right? This is a prosecutor that kept misgendering a trans woman, that goes into Fox News and talks about this stuff openly, and I'm still haven't been able to deal with effectively. Now, when the comments about the hyenas came up, I had somebody from the public defender's office bring it up, but then they did not want to put their name to a complaint, right? So, you know, this is a complicated work environment. And we are in a moment in our history where, you know, the polarization and the misinformation that is out there is impacting how many people think about many things, right? There are still people that think that Joe Biden was not lawfully elected, right? Perhaps as much as a third of this country. What I deal with is a microcosm of that. You know, Tucker Carlson did a 3-day series about LA was on fire, and they were putting a picture of a building in LA with superimposed a fire on my face. Everything that was in that show was a bold-faced lie, right? But as a result of that, you know, I was getting death threats. My family was getting death threats, right? I didn't hear too many people going out there and saying, you know, this is a lie, and push back. And then, you know, it's only, you know, the group that we have here that is taking the beating. You know, I have my director of communications, who happens to be an African-American woman, a very smart lawyer with years and years of experience. We have people disparaging her on social media regularly, right? I haven't seen too many public defenders or other people going up in social media and fighting back to defend this woman who did not sign up for this, which, by the way, they're posting pictures of her kids. And you have to ask yourself, why would you do that unless you're seeking to harm this person and her family, right? We had another African-American woman that I brought in from the public defender's office who had her home pelted with pellets, or, you know, fragmented the front windows of her home. Her teenage kid was in that room moments before that occurred, right? That's the
Well, you know,
world that we operate.
clearly this country is in bad shape. And you being a trailblazer like Larry Krasner, I mean, you've put yourself out there as a progressive district attorney, and progressives, the two of us being progressives, we're very grateful for that. And the last question, I want to talk about the difference between restorative justice and our traditional form of justice in the United States. And I want you to describe for us how you conduct your operations as a progressive district attorney and how that differs from, let's say, a Steve Cooley.
Well, I mean, first of all, we look at incarceration as the last alternative to our work. So we begin from a place that we understand that some people may need to be incarcerated because they're dangerous for a reason at the moment. We understand that accountability is important, but we believe that we use those measures only as a last resort, and we try to be very surgical about the way that we use those tools. At the same time, we work very aggressively to try to ensure that where we can, that we're providing opportunities for people to redeem themselves. So we work with other partners. For instance, when we're doing resentencing work, we're trying to make sure that people that we're engaging in resentencing work, that they're coming back to a thoughtful reentry program that generally is a residential program, hopefully for a good year and a half, where they're going to have people that are going to deal with employment issues. They're going to deal with just reintegration into society. You got somebody who's been in prison for a extended period of time. They might not even have ever had a cell phone, right? We don't think about those things. How do they operate in that world? Because we want it to be successful. We also are implementing full-fledged restorative justice programs. We're starting with juveniles, and my goal is eventually to take it to young adults and below and above. And a true restorative justice model is really it's a victim-centered approach to the work, but it's work where you bring the victim, you bring the person that caused the harm. There is an admission of the harm that was caused, but then there is a collective approach. And when I say collective, we have facilitators that work with all the people involved to make sure that, first of all, we restore the victim to a place of, we try to restore them to the place of health where they can. And we also make sure that the person that caused the harm not only acknowledges, but becomes part of the reparation of the harm. But then we also provide for an avenue for that person to be a path for redemption and rehabilitation, because we understand that unless we also deal with a person that caused the harm in a way that they can come back in and be a thoughtful participant in our community, they're going to continue to harm themselves and others. So it's really a full circle. Again, the victim is at the center, and we're doing everything that we have to do in order to mitigate or reduce or hopefully repair the harm. The person that caused the harm has to acknowledge that process and has to be part of that reparation. But we also look for ways to ensure that that person is going to have a path to success. We're starting with primarily 14 to 17-year-olds. We're working with several partners, and our goal is then to move into young adults and eventually move into the larger population. And what that means is that actually where we can, with the agreement of the victims, we actually move the case out of the traditional system and we put them into these buckets. We work with nonprofits that do this work regularly. And the goal is really to, again, minimize the footprint of the traditional criminal legal system, because we know that it fails everyone, right? Victims do not get their harm treated. Offenders often are simply warehoused for a period of time, but again, their problems are not treated. They go back out in a worse condition than what they were before. And we know that generally our jails and our prisons are not places of rehabilitation. And therefore, the recidivism rate that we have is a direct result of the fact that we lack rehabilitation and reentry. So we're trying to also address those issues where we can. And yet we want to be very mindful of the fact that when there is crime that occurs, we want to make sure that we actively address it. But the difference is we may address it differently than somebody like Steve Cooley that simply just lock people up over and over again, and people keep coming back over and over again. And the crime rates, quite frankly, remain pretty steady because they were not addressing the root causes of the problem.
Wonderful. Well, Dick, do you have anything else you want to say before we close?
No, we thank you for your time. It was a wonderful interview, and we're so glad that you're running again, and we wish you well on your new campaign.
That's right.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, District Attorney George Gascón. So
thank you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.